clearly a lot of details still need to be worked out in this phased-in agreement. Is it, though, an important first step here?
I think it's a crucially significant milestone, even if there are still quite a few landmines along the way. We have now a 72-hour period before it begins implementation, where much can go wrong. The Israeli government has yet to formally endorse it. And then even more importantly, there's a transition from the first to the second and then to the third stage of a phased agreement where a lot of mischief can be played. But having said that, I think the crucial factor here is that the United States, and particularly the incoming Trump administration, has sent an unambiguous message to Israel more than any other party that it wants this crisis to be resolved before Trump enters the White House on January 20th. And that's the reason, I think, why Israel has now accepted an agreement that is virtually identical to the one proposed by Biden in May and accepted by Hamas already last July.
Let's put up a social media post you put on X, formerly known as Twitter, and we're going to put it up. I'm going to read it. I'm sure you know what you said, but I'm going to read it for our audience. You said, listening to Biden and Blinken take credit for the imminent Gaza ceasefire agreement is the funniest thing I've watched since A Fish Called Wanda. And for those people who don't know, A Fish Called Wanda is a movie, a comedy from the 1980s. Those of us old enough do remember it. But what do you mean with that post, Mouin? What did you want to hear from the President of the United States that you didn't hear?
Well, I have zero expectations to hear anything of value from the outgoing administration. And the reason I made that statement is because if one looks at the policies that have actually been implemented by the outgoing administration, they have not used the enormous leverage at their disposal to compel an end to Israel's genocidal onslaught in the Gaza Strip, or to produce a ceasefire and exchange of captives and hostages between Israel and the Palestinians, but rather they have enabled Israel to continue with, even to intensify its campaign by providing it with weaponry, armaments, and an almost unlimited supply, diplomatic cover, and at every stage where even Israeli negotiators were blaming their own leadership for sabotaging an agreement by introducing new conditions and so on, of pursuing a narrative and telling the world that really the only obstacle to an agreement was the intransigence of Hamas, even though in reality the Palestinians had already accepted the agreement that has now finally, after many months, been concluded today. And so they've been systematically dishonest, also to the extent of violating not only international law, but even U.S. domestic legislation. And this is because they were fully on board with Israel's campaign and Israel's war aims, not only in the Gaza Strip, but more broadly in the region.
But do you think that's going to change under the Trump administration? Will it get worse?
Well, we don't really know, because I think the one thing everyone understands about Trump is that he's very erratic and unpredictable, and virtually anything and its opposite is possible. But having said that, I think Trump has been very clear that he does not want to have to deal with a major crisis on the day he enters the White House, sent this message very clearly to the parties concerned in the Middle East, and we now have evidence that it had a clear impact on Israel, where its Prime Minister, Netanyahu, decided it was not a very smart thing to do to be on Trump's bad side on his first day in office. I think one of the challenges moving forward is that Hamas is maybe putting too much trust in the assumption that Trump will follow through on resolving this crisis, and Israel may, or Netanyahu specifically, may believe that he can play Trump once the first stage is over and resume a war and avoid a second stage. So there's still lots of work to be done. There's still very much that can go wrong, but I think today is a crucially important and hopefully a constructive and positive beginning to put this horrific campaign to an end.
And very quickly, we're running out of time. Mouin, talk about what it means for Palestinians. More than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed. Over 1 million have been displaced. Many are going to be allowed to go back to their communities, to their homes. But what homes? What communities? The daunting challenges of rebuilding Gaza, even if after this agreement goes through and is implemented. Talk about some of those challenges.
Well, I think simply, this unending stream of bombs raining down on them, if that indeed does come to a stop on Sunday, that is already a huge step. But I think the real risk is that once there is quiet in the Gaza Strip and it's no longer dominating the international headlines, that the entire task of reconstruction will simply go down the memory hole. And if that does indeed happen, we've simply laid the seeds for the next crisis in the next few years.
All right. Thank you so much, Mouin Rabbani, joining us from Montreal.